She was always the strong one, until that night. I found her by the window, eyes red, voice trembling. When I said, "They're wrong," she didn't argue. She just let me hold her, like she'd been waiting for someone to finally mean it. The night had that kind of silence that only rain can make, soft, steady, unhurried. Each drop against the window felt like time itself slowing down. Her apartment was dim, lit only by the faint amber glow of a floor lamp, its light falling over the books, the sketches, and the cup of tea that had long gone cold beside her. She was sitting near the window, one knee pulled close, her face turned toward the city but her eyes seeing something much farther away. I hadn't meant to come by that night. It wasn't planned, it never was with her. I told myself it was just to drop off something she'd left behind at the cafe, but if I was honest, I'd missed her presence, the quiet steadiness she carried, the way her words could calm a restless day without even trying. But when I knocked, and the door opened, I knew instantly something was different. Her hair was loosely tied, a few strands falling across her cheek. No makeup. No forced smile. Just raw, unguarded silence. She didn't greet me like she usually did. She simply stepped aside, wordless, as if she didn't have the strength to pretend. I entered quietly, closing the door behind me, careful not to disturb the fragile air between us. I could feel it, that invisible heaviness that hangs around someone who's been fighting a storm inside. There was no dramatic crying, no chaos, just the quiet ache of someone who had run out of ways to hold herself together. "Hey," I said softly, not expecting a reply. She nodded, but her eyes stayed on the rain. I wanted to ask if she was okay, but the words felt useless. She wasn't. And she didn't need to be. The rain kept tracing long, slow lines down the glass. In its rhythm, I heard everything she wasn't saying. That kind of silence, it speaks, if you listen. After a while, I moved closer, standing behind her chair. The faint scent of her perfume, jasmine and something faintly woody, filled the small space between us. It felt like standing near a memory. I could see the slight tremble in her shoulders, the way her fingers curled around the edge of the mug as if to steady herself. She finally whispered, almost to herself, "They said I don't belong anymore." Her voice cracked at the word belong. It wasn't anger, it was something deeper, disappointment, maybe betrayal. That's when I realized she didn't need comfort in words. She needed truth, quiet, steady, unshakable. I took a slow breath, letting the moment stretch just enough before I said, "Then they're wrong." She didn't turn to look at me right away. But her shoulders dropped just a little, as if those 3 words had taken some of the weight off her. Outside, the rain softened, almost in response, like the world was listening too. And for the first time that night, she exhaled, not just air, but a little of the hurt she'd been carrying. I didn't move closer yet. I just stood there, letting her know I wasn't leaving. Because sometimes, the first step in comforting someone isn't touch or words. It's presence, the quiet kind that says, "You don't have to face this alone anymore." For a long time, the only sound between us was the rain. It wasn't awkward, just fragile. The kind of quiet you don't want to break unless you mean it. She still hadn't turned fully toward me. Her profile caught the lamplight, soft and weary, and for a moment, I wished I could take the sadness from her face and carry it myself. When she finally spoke, her voice came out small, a whisper tangled with disbelief. "They said I've changed. That I'm not what I used to be." The words trembled, then broke apart halfway through the sentence. I stepped closer, careful not to startle her. She didn't move away, but her shoulders tensed, the kind of reflex that comes from trying to stay strong for too long. She looked down, biting at her lip as if trying to hold the words inside, but once they started, they wouldn't stop. I gave everything I had to that place. Every day, every hour, and now they say I don't fit anymore. She laughed, not out of humor, but disbelief. "It's strange, isn't it? You can give years of yourself to something, and still be replaced like you were never there." Her hand tightened around the mug again, the knuckles whitening. I reached out, slow, deliberate, and gently took it from her fingers. The ceramic was cool, untouched for too long. I set it on the table beside her and kept my hand there for a second, close enough that she could feel my warmth if she needed it. "Then they're wrong," I said quietly. She looked up at me then, really looked. There was something in her eyes I hadn't seen before. Not just sadness, but a flicker of something fragile, almost like hope. It startled her, I think, that someone could sound so certain when she felt so lost. Her lip trembled slightly before she turned away again. "You don't even know what they said." "I don't have to," I replied. "I know you." Those words seemed to catch her off guard. She drew in a shaky breath, her hand coming up to brush a tear that escaped before she could stop it. She shook her head slightly, almost embarrassed by her own emotion. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I don't know why don't apologize," I interrupted softly. "Not for feeling." The rain outside had quieted to a faint patter. The room felt smaller now, warmer, as if the air itself had shifted. She turned back toward me, her eyes glistening, and for the first time, she didn't try to hold back the tears. Something inside her finally gave way, and it wasn't weakness. It was trust. Her voice broke when she said, "You really think they're wrong?" "I know they are," I answered, steady and low. And in that moment, I saw the first true crack in her armor, the moment where pain met understanding, and she finally let someone stand close enough to see it. After that, neither of us said much. The words had already done their work, they'd opened something between us that silence now filled, not awkwardly, but tenderly. The air in her apartment felt different, gentler, like the storm outside had passed its weight onto the room and then slowly dissolved. She sat back in her chair, her shoulders no longer drawn tight. I could see the faint reflection of her face in the rain-blurred window, her eyes softer now, but still carrying the shimmer of tears that refused to fully fall. I stayed near her, leaning against the bookshelf across from the window, giving her space but not distance. Every few seconds, she'd glance at me, as if to check if I was still there. Each time, I met her gaze without speaking, just a quiet reassurance that I wasn't going anywhere. After a while, she let out a small, shaky laugh. "You know what's funny?" she said, her tone light but fragile. "They think I'm made of steel. They think I don't break." I smiled faintly. "Maybe that's because you never let them see it." She looked at me then, really looked, and for a brief second, her eyes searched mine like she was trying to find something steady to hold on to. There was a flicker of surprise in her expression, maybe even gratitude. "I didn't realize you noticed that much," she murmured. "I notice everything," I replied softly. "Especially the things you try to hide." That made her laugh again, a genuine one this time. The sound was quiet but warm, like something inside her had finally begun to thaw. It filled the space between us in a way words never could. She shifted slightly, tucking one leg beneath her and turning to face me more fully. The lamplight touched the side of her face, tracing faint lines of tiredness near her eyes, the kind that only come from carrying too much alone. "You're too kind," she said, half smiling, half testing the thought. "Kind?" I repeated, shaking my head lightly. "No. Just, honest." That made her go quiet again. The rain outside softened to a whisper, and in its rhythm, our breathing began to align. I could feel her calm returning, fragile but real. Her hand moved absent-mindedly, fingers brushing the armrest of her chair, and for a moment I thought she might reach for mine. But she didn't, and maybe that restraint made the moment even more intimate. We sat like that, just near enough for warmth to pass between us. I could sense her heartbeat in the air, not through touch, but through the quiet awareness of someone finally letting you see their unguarded self. I wanted to tell her that she didn't have to be strong all the time. That it was okay to be seen in the in-between, not perfect, not composed, just real. But I didn't. Some truths don't need to be spoken. They just need to be felt, in the small space between two people who finally understand each other's silence. It happened slowly, like warmth spreading through a cold room. The tension in her shoulders softened first, then the guarded set of her jaw. She was still facing the window, but her voice carried differently now, lower and steadier, as if something inside her had decided to stop pretending. "They think I don't care," she said quietly. "But I do. Maybe too much." Her tone was almost bitter, but underneath it was exhaustion, the kind that comes from holding yourself together in front of people who never really see you. She exhaled shakily, resting her forehead on the back of her hand. "I just wanted to do something that mattered. And now it feels like I never did." I didn't answer right away. I knew she didn't need advice or false comfort. She just needed space to fall apart without being judged for it. So I moved closer, slow enough that she could feel it happening but gentle enough to leave her in control. When I reached out, I hesitated for half a second, then let my hand rest lightly on hers. Her skin was cool, soft, her pulse a fragile rhythm beneath my thumb. She didn't pull away. In fact, she seemed to exhale into the touch, her fingers trembling slightly before stilling beneath mine. "It's not true," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "You did matter. You still do." She looked up, eyes glassy with the kind of tears that come from years of staying quiet. "Then why does it hurt this much?" "Because you cared," I said simply. "That's what makes it real." Her lips parted, as if she wanted to argue, but the words never came. Instead, she drew in a sharp breath, and her composure cracked, just enough for the pain to slip through. And then it happened, the moment when she finally let go. Her hand turned beneath mine, fingers gripping back, seeking something to hold on to. Her shoulders began to shake, not in sobs, but in quiet, restrained tremors that spoke louder than any breakdown. I stepped closer, just enough that she could lean if she wanted to. And she did. Slowly, she tilted forward, her forehead finding my chest. The contact was tentative at first, as if she was testing whether she was allowed to need someone. Then, with a small sigh that broke what was left of her restraint, she let her weight rest against me. Her hair brushed against my chin, carrying the faint scent of rain and jasmine. My arms moved on instinct, wrapping around her carefully, not to claim, but to steady. She didn't say anything, she didn't need to. Her heartbeat pressed against my ribs, quick and uneven at first, then gradually slowing as the silence deepened around us. I didn't speak. I didn't try to fill the quiet. I just held her, breathing slow and even, until her breathing began to match mine. In that stillness, I realized something I hadn't before, that real comfort isn't about stopping someone's pain. It's about being the place where it can finally rest. The rain had faded to a soft drizzle, leaving only the ticking of the clock and the faint hum of the city beyond her window. Yet, inside that dimly lit room, time felt suspended, fragile, breathless, almost sacred. She was still in my arms, quiet now, her breathing slow and steady against my chest. I could feel the warmth of her cheek through my shirt, the way her hands rested lightly at my sides, not clinging, just there, present, real. Her tears had stopped, but the heaviness hadn't left, it had simply turned into something quieter, something neither of us knew how to name. When she finally lifted her head, the space between us felt charged. Her face was only inches from mine, eyes glistening in the amber glow of the lamp. There was a stillness in that look, not awkward, not impulsive, but deeply human. The kind that makes your heart forget its rhythm for a second. She opened her mouth to speak, but no sound came out. Her gaze dropped briefly to my lips, then back to my eyes, and that tiny, unintentional movement said everything words couldn't. My breath caught. I didn't move, didn't dare. The air felt different now, heavier, like the line between comfort and something more was thinning by the second. I could feel her heartbeat again, steady but insistent, echoing faintly against my chest. Her hand shifted, brushing against my arm as she straightened slightly. That small touch, skin against fabric, was enough to send a quiet shiver through me. She must have felt it too, because her eyes softened, torn between gratitude and something dangerously close to longing. "You shouldn't have to see me like this," she whispered, her voice trembling just enough to make my throat tighten. "I'm glad I did," I said. The words came out before I could think. Her brows lifted, surprised, maybe even touched. "Why?" "Because it means you trust me," I answered. "And that's not something you give easily." That silence returned, but this time it was heavier, filled with something unspoken, electric. She looked at me for a long time, eyes tracing my face like she was memorizing it. The rain outside began again, faint but rhythmic, and it felt like the whole world was holding its breath with us. I thought she might pull away. I even told myself she should. But she didn't, not yet. She stayed there, close enough that I could see every shade in her eyes, every small tremor in her lips. And then, just as the moment threatened to break, she exhaled softly, stepped back, and turned toward the window. The space between us filled again with air, cool and necessary. Neither of us said a word. But the silence that followed wasn't the same as before. It carried a pulse, something alive, something neither of us would admit out loud. And in that heartbeat of almost, we both knew, we'd crossed something invisible, even if we never touched it. By the time the rain stopped completely, the first traces of dawn were already pressing softly through the curtains. The city outside was washed clean, hushed, still glistening from the night. Inside, her apartment felt different, quieter, but not heavy. The kind of quiet that follows release. We hadn't spoken much since she'd stepped away. She sat back by the window again, her knees drawn close, her gaze lost somewhere between the reflection of the waking city and her own tired thoughts. I stayed nearby, leaning against the wall, my eyes tracing the faint outlines of her face as the light shifted from gold to pale white. She broke the silence first, her voice low and fragile. "I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't come tonight." There was no drama in her tone, just honesty, stripped of pride, stripped of distance. I smiled faintly. "You would have found a way. You always do." She shook her head gently. "No. Not this time." Her voice wavered, then steadied. "You made things feel lighter, even when they weren't." That word, lighter, lingered between us. It wasn't flattery, it was confession. I moved closer, slow enough to give her time to look away if she wanted to. She didn't. Her eyes followed me, calm now, softer, carrying the traces of everything we hadn't said through the night. She looked at me like someone seeing clearly for the first time in a long while. "Do you always do this?" she asked quietly. "What?" I tilted my head, half smiling. "Show up right when someone needs you most." "Only when it matters," I replied. She laughed softly, a sound so small, yet it felt like morning itself. Then she stood, brushing invisible creases from her clothes, her movements slower, lighter, as if she was rediscovering her body after too much tension. I stepped aside to give her room, but she didn't walk past me right away. Her hand reached up, almost instinctively, and she fixed the collar of my shirt. The gesture was simple, casual even, but it felt like a touch from another world. Her fingers lingered just a moment too long against the fabric, steadying something neither of us wanted to name. When she finally stepped back, her smile was small but real. "You should get some rest," she said. "You've carried enough for one night." "I'm fine," I murmured. "I just didn't want you to be alone." She looked at me for a long second before replying, "You have no idea how much that means." The light fell fully across her face then, soft, warm, alive. For the first time since I'd arrived, she looked peaceful. The kind of peace that doesn't come from being fixed, but from being understood. And as she turned back toward the window, her silhouette bathed in morning light, I realized I hadn't just comforted her, I'd changed the way she saw herself. And somehow, without meaning to, she'd done the same to me. When the morning finally settled in, the city below began to stir, cars starting, shutters opening, footsteps echoing faintly from the street. The night's quiet intimacy began to loosen, but it didn't disappear, it lingered in the air like the aftertaste of something sweet and unspoken. She stood by the door now, her coat draped loosely over her arm, her expression calm, but there was a softness around her eyes that hadn't been there before. I could tell she was still piecing herself together, not perfectly, not completely, but in a way that looked real this time. Neither of us wanted to say the word goodbye. It felt too final for what had happened. So we didn't. Instead, I reached for her bag and handed it to her. Our fingers brushed, a small, quiet touch, nothing deliberate, but it sent that same quiet current through me that had followed us all night. She looked up, her lips parting slightly, as if she wanted to say something but wasn't sure how. I beat her to it. "Don't believe what they said," I murmured. My voice came out steadier than I expected, but inside, it was shaking. She gave a small, tired smile, the kind that comes from knowing someone really means what they say. "I won't," she replied softly. Then, after a pause, "Not anymore." Her hand lifted then, not to wave, not to shake mine, but to rest lightly on my arm. It was such a gentle, grateful touch that I almost didn't breathe. Her thumb brushed once against my sleeve, like she was memorizing the feel of the moment before it slipped away. "Thank you," she whispered. I wanted to tell her there was nothing to thank me for. That she'd done something for me, too, reminded me that connection doesn't need permission, that sometimes just being there is enough. But the words stayed stuck in my throat, because saying them out loud felt too small for what we shared. She opened the door. The cool morning air rushed in, carrying the faint scent of rain and jasmine, the same scent that had filled the room when I first arrived. She hesitated in the doorway for a second, turning back to look at me. Her hair caught the light, her eyes soft but steady. "Take care of yourself," she said. "I will," I answered quietly. "You too." She nodded once, almost like a promise, and then she was gone. The sound of the door closing echoed softly through the room, not sharp, not lonely, just final enough to mark the end of something gentle. I stood there for a long time, watching the light shift across the walls. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was peaceful, filled with everything we hadn't needed to say. And though she was gone, I could still feel her presence, in the faint warmth on my sleeve, in the echo of her words, in the quiet steadiness she'd left behind. It wasn't a goodbye. It was something quieter. A knowing. That sometimes the people who need comfort the most, end up leaving their warmth with you instead.